experience of Henry Alline, a devoted evangelist who worked in Nova Scotia 100 years ago, and who thus vividly describes the high-water mark of the religious melancholy which formed its beginning. The type was not unlike Bunyan's. Quote, "Everything I saw seemed to be a burden to me. The earth seemed accursed for my sake. All trees, plants, rocks, hills, and vales seemed to be dressed in mourning and groaning under the weight of the curse, and everything around me seemed to be conspiring my ruin. My sins seemed to be laid open, so that I thought that everyone I saw knew them, and sometimes I was almost ready to acknowledge many things which I thought they knew. Yea, sometimes it seemed to me as if everyone was pointing me out as the most guilty wretch upon earth. I had now so great a sense of the vanity and emptiness of all things here below, that I knew the whole world could not possibly make me happy, no, nor the whole system of creation. When I waked in the morning, the first thought would be, 'O my wretched soul, what shall I do? Where shall I go?' And when I lay down, would say, 'I shall be perhaps in hell before morning.' I would many times look on the beasts with envy, wishing with all my heart I was in their place, that I might have no soul to lose. And when I have seen birds flying over my head, have often thought within myself, 'Oh, that I could fly away from my danger and distress! Oh, how happy should I be if I were in their place!'" Close quote. Envy of the placid beasts seems to be a very widespread affection in this type of sadness. The worst kind of melancholy is that which takes the form of panic fear. Here is an excellent example, for permission to print which I have to thank the sufferer. The original is in French, and though the subject was evidently in a bad nervous condition at the time of which he writes, his case has otherwise the merit of extreme simplicity. I translate freely. Quote, "Whilst in this state of philosophic pessimism and general depression of spirits about my prospects, I went one evening into a dressing‐room in the twilight to procure some article that was there, when suddenly there fell upon me without any warning, just as if it came out of the darkness, a horrible fear of my own existence. Simultaneously there arose in my mind the image of an epileptic patient whom I had seen in the asylum, a black-haired youth with greenish skin, entirely idiotic, who used to sit all day on one of the benches, or rather shelves against the wall, with his knees drawn up against his chin, and the coarse gray undershirt, which was his only garment, drawn over them, enclosing his entire figure. He sat there like a sort of sculptured Egyptian cat or Peruvian mummy, moving nothing but his black eyes, and looking absolutely non-human. This image and my fear entered into a species of combination with each other. That shape am I felt potentially. Nothing that I possess can defend me against that fate, if the hour for it should strike for me as it struck for him. There was such a horror of him, and such a perception of my own merely momentary discrepancy from him, that it was as if something hitherto solid within my breast gave way entirely, and I became a mass of quivering fear. After this, the universe was changed for me altogether. I awoke morning after morning with a horrible dread at the pit of my stomach, and with a sense of the insecurity of life that I never knew before, and that I have never felt since." Begin footnote. Compare Bunyan. Quote, "There was I struck into a very great trembling, insomuch that at some times I could, for days together, feel my very body, as well as my mind, to shake and totter under the sense of the dreadful judgment of God that should fall on those that have sinned that most fearful and unpardonable sin. I felt also such clogging and heat in my stomach, by reason of this my terror, that I was, especially at some times, as if my breastbone would have split asunder. Thus did I wind, and twine, and shrink, under the burden that was upon me, which burden also did so oppress me that I could neither stand, nor go, nor lie, either at rest or quiet." It was like a revelation, and although the immediate feelings passed away, the experience has made me sympathetic with the morbid feelings of others ever since. It gradually faded, but for months I was unable to go out into the dark alone. In general, I dreaded to be left alone. I remember wondering how other people could live, how I myself had ever lived, so unconscious of that pit of insecurity beneath the surface of life. My mother, in particular, a very cheerful person, seemed to me a perfect paradox in her unconsciousness of danger, which you may well believe I was very careful not to disturb by revelations of my own state of mind. I have always thought that this experience of melancholia of mine had a religious bearing." On asking this correspondent to explain more fully what he meant by these last words, the answer he wrote was this, "I mean that the fear was so invasive and powerful that if I had not clung to scripture texts like 'The eternal God is my refuge,' etc., 'Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden,' etc., 'I am the resurrection and the life,' etc., I think I should have grown really insane." There is no need of more examples. The cases we have looked at are enough. One of them gives us the vanity of mortal things, another the sense of sin, and the remaining one describes the fear of the universe. And in one or other of these three ways, it always is that man's original optimism and self-satisfaction get leveled with the dust. In none of these cases was there any intellectual insanity or delusion about matters of fact, but were we disposed to open the chapter of really insane melancholia, with its hallucinations and delusions, it would be a worse story still. Desperation, absolute and complete, the whole universe coagulating about the sufferer into a material of overwhelming horror, surrounding him without opening or end. Not the conception or intellectual perception of evil, but the grisly, blood-freezing, heart-palsying sensation of it close upon one, and no other conception or sensation able to live for a moment in its presence. How irreverently remote seem all our usual refined optimisms and intellectual and moral consolations in presence of a need of help like this. Here is the real core of the religious problem. Help! Help! No prophet can claim to bring a final message unless he says things that will have a sound of reality in the ears of victims such as these. But the deliverance must come in as strong a form as the complaint, if it is to take effect, and that seems a reason why the coarser religions, revivalistic, orgiastic, with blood and miracles and supernatural operations, may possibly never be displaced. Some constitutions need them too much. Arrived at this point, we can see how great an antagonism may naturally arise between the healthy-minded way of viewing life and the way that takes all this experience of evil as something essential. To this latter way, the morbid-minded way, as we might call it, healthy-mindedness, pure and simple, seems unspeakably blind and shallow. To the healthy-minded way, on the other hand, the way of the sick soul seems unmanly and diseased. With their grubbing in rat-holes instead of living in the light, with their manufacture of fears and preoccupation with every unwholesome kind of misery, There is something almost obscene about these children of wrath and craving